This man has never knocked nobody out cold. He's a bully. He's slow. He has no skill, no footwork. He's awkward. And I have been giving him a name. Because he fights. When he's fighting, if you ever watch him in the ring, he drags like that after his opponent. And how's the mummy gonna catch me?
And all I had to do was to go out and beat a man who had no skill, no class. Seriously, the man had no skill. I don't know why the world is so foolish to believe in him and think that I wasn't going to win.
Well, when you say you're ready to go to war right now...
I see that guy on the street, I beat him before the fight.
You'd actually take him on before the fight?
Beat him like I'm his daddy. Basketball players out there, football players, they want to beat so bad, they want to get everybody. I'll go to Mars, I don't care.
For the thousands in attendance and the millions watching around the world, let's get ready to rumble!
Hey, good morning, and welcome to another edition of Lights Out Sports Debate, where we dare you to debate. And today, we're going to be discussing what you see there. And it's going to be, is there better competition, or does the competition vary and certain from era to era? My name is T Perfect, and this is Dart. Dart, what's going on?
Living the dream, T Perfect. Living the dream.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, so that's, we just got to right into it, right? Because this is something that's been, like, we see it being talked about, right? And usually it's just kind of being brought up for usually in an effort to either push a narrative that one player is better than another, or usually it's like the GOAT debate or something. But obviously we've heard it from in relative to different players as well. But what do you think about that topic in general? Just like this era is better than the other, and just for whatever reasons they want to bring up.
Yeah, for me, I think it's the most ridiculous thing in the world, because I say this quite often, is that you can only beat who's in your place and time. And how can you really judge if you play time machine basketball? Would LeBron James do better if he played in the 90s, or whatever variance of how you want to put it? I think that the guys that get disrespected in this way with these narratives is just absolutely ridiculous. I think the competition is, generally speaking, the greatest competition that you can have within the NBA during whatever period of time. So, and then there's a misnomer that now with the NBA, there was Jim Crow issues. There were issues with integration with black players. However, there were black players even in the early 1950s. So in the NBA, it's not as if they weren't there. There was, unwritten rule per se about certain things, but it wasn't a actual rule per se. But either way, they saw the best white players at the time that were playing. So no, I think it's ridiculous when people say that. I think that I don't think you can judge even if you wanted to. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I agree completely. This is one issue where I think we're in lockstep in, because, like you said, it's really just you can't play time machine basketball. The players don't, come in with certain advantages or, you know, different rules from player to player or team to team. It's like you're playing with the same set of rules against the same people, you know, with the same handicap, same advantage, everything like that. And that's really from era to era. And like I said, it's the competition's better in certain era. That really is a misnomer because how? For one thing, you can't possibly prove that. It's not. It's like it's a subjective take, right? Like you're not going to be able to say, you know, if you're talking about just certain players and certain teams. I mean, that's happened throughout history, and you can't really juxtapose that. And like I said, it's the best always rise to the top and play the best, right? Like when you're talking about consistently finals, playoffs, whatever the case. And so, yeah, it's not like, you know, magically this team is going to play another team 20 years in the future. You know, it's dumb when I hear that take, and it's almost always used to push the LeBron James narrative. I mean, let's just say it for what it is. I mean, it's just, you really never really heard that until, you know, you started hearing the GOAT debate, like start ramping up. And, you know, this is when they started saying, oh, well, you know, what else can we use? And so obviously you started hearing narratives like that, you know, it's just like, you know, and the ways that they use to try and support that, their argument are, I think, pretty comical. We can get into that.
Yeah, no, I got some lag here, so I missed what a lot of what you're saying. But when people were but people do use it with LeBron James, which is it is funny. I mean, it's to say that that Kevin Durant or Steph Curry are the greatest players of all time, and that they're the best. That's the, you know, Michael Jordan wouldn't know what to do if he faced guys like that, or whoever, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, that they just would have had no capability to defeat them. And LeBron James is losing because he's playing against this great era. You might have said that, that's the reason why LeBron James is losing, is that he just is playing this great era of players, and he can't help it. But it's ironic that every other great player just beat everybody. But all of a sudden now that's not how it's working. I mean, again, I'm very generalizing the case, but LeBron James has won a lot of championships. He has, but the reason why people excuse him losing in the finals, etc., is just it's funny.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think that it's like you said, it's you really heard this narrative pop up and start being pushed to excuse, you know, like the finals record that he has and things like that. When in reality, no one was really saying, oh, you know, I devalue, you know, players who lose. Like it was just a narrative and like things that popped up like excuses, right? And that's not really anything like that you heard applied to any other player in league history. You know, you didn't see these excuses. They were just like, hey, they lost, whatever. You know, you never really heard anyone deep dive and be like, well, I can excuse that loss or this loss or whatever. No other great got that treatment. Only it's really just LeBron James, right? And, you know, it's, you know, like even when they were talking about guys who would lose, like Kobe or Magic, you know, it's just like, yeah, they dissected the losses, but it wasn't like, oh, you know, we can brush that on. It was, hey, like when we talked about Kobe Bryant, 2004, they're like, no, Kobe lost, and it's because of him. You know, you didn't hear like, oh no, that was a great Pistons team defensively, or, you know, Malone and Peyton were 40. You know, you never heard those. You see, like it was just like, oh, they had a super team, they lost. Kobe sucks. This is like what you were hearing, and now, but with LeBron, it's, you know, when you're talking about them, it's completely the opposite. It's just like he lost, but, you know, and then, you know, insert reasons. And so, you know, that's one thing I think you can kind of get away with or get away from, and because it's just bad takes all around.
One of my favorites is when he returned to the Cavaliers team, that people would say that he didn't have great teams during that time. I've heard that recently, is that Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love, you know, there's no way that they could have beat the Warriors or LeBron James because he had such a trash team during that time. But he had two guys that were all-stars, obviously just fantastic players just altogether, and fantastic role players, that proven role players that were traded to him that were, you know, in their late 20s, etc. God, I'm drawing a blank, but the two guards, the New York guard, J.R. Smith, and the other guy, what's the other guy's name? I forget. But the two guards that he had playing with him during that time. And it's funny, just that the excuses. And I mean, and I do think it's a phenomenon in respect to, and now it's everybody has said that, for basketball, or everyone wants to think that their era's the best or that it's the greatest era ever. But the thing is that when people are saying it now, I think they really think that, like, that there is no possibility that somebody from a prior era or some other teams are potentially greater than this one in certain ways. I think people are really on board this. Latest is the greatest argument for a plethora of reasons. What are some reasons you think people want to die on this hill?
Well, I mean, obviously, I think the main reason that they, like we kind of discussed, the tip top main reason is because of they say that and they're LeBron fanboys. Like, that's really the overarching reason there. Obviously, when we get into it, you do run into the occasional person who isn't necessarily a LeBron James fan, but they either just started watching the game recently and they kind of excuse their lack of knowledge or their lack of willingness to go do some research and whatnot, go back and come through tapes, whatever the case. And they just say, no, we're just going to say that this era is better. And, this era is, there's no competition or everyone's better today at everything. That's one thing I've heard very recently too, is, players today are just so much better at all aspects of the game, which is ludicrous. And, that's one thing. I think they're pushing that narrative so hard because, there's consensus is Mike's the GOAT. And, people are able to say, oh, that was some great basketball back then, 80s, 90s, and, even give props to the 60s. And they hate hearing that today. They just hate it. They say, no. There was no basketball before 2016 or, whatever the case is. And like you said, to your point, like they would even come up and say, oh, like he had trash teams or whatever. It's not like today where everyone needs like 4 or 5 also, whatever the case is. And we know that's false. And so I think that's their willingness to die on the hill is because mainly of their desire and goals to prop up LeBron for any way possible, I think.
Yeah, I do think a lot of it is just the fanboyism of LeBron James. Sorry, my son woke up. But the aspect of it is that, sorry, he's working around back right next to me. The aspect of it is that LeBron James and the fanboyism, it's just ridiculous. I've heard people say, well, Michael Jordan couldn't dribble with his left hand, which is ridiculous. I think you may have been here this one show, but this guy some time ago was talking about how Clyde Drexler couldn't dribble with his left hand, and then Rex made him cry. He literally made this kid cry, which was funny, but it was also, in ways, because this guy was so serious about it. And then Rex responded, well, you're talking about this world-class player. He couldn't play with his left hand. He's like, he can only play with one hand. Then Clyde Drexler's the greatest basketball player of all time if he could only play with his one hand. And, it's just ridiculous, some of these people's thoughts of how the competition and the skills and everything is so much greater now. And I think a lot of it lies in how people are playing basketball now, that they just really, really hone in on this efficiency and these analytics. So, you can see people in the stats that they're again, this is not a holistic thing, but particularly with the 3-point shots, they're doing more volume, and then there's some level of having a higher percentage of people that are shooting 3-pointers. And it's like, that's about it. Like, people just want to hang the hat on that and say, well, these guys of the past, because they didn't shoot and they didn't have such a high efficiency, means they can't play basketball then. That's how a lot of people treat it. And it's ridiculous. It's just, what has happened is that you've had the math nerds insert themselves into basketball, and that's why there's a lot of these things happening. I'm not for good or for bad, but that's a reason. And I think that people just don't bring that in the context that, you know, somebody like Allen Iverson, I mean, a lot of great old-time players also had great efficiency. I'm not saying that everyone was trash, but when people look at in respect to their efficiency, but you look at guys like Bob Cousy or George Mikan, people are like, oh, they just can't shoot. No, they often were some of the most efficient players in their time. It's just how the style of play was. They accepted the misses because they wanted some of the, you know, the fast pace or the equipment, et cetera. And it just was how they played and how it was accepted. So it's funny hearing people say that. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I agree, because, you know, that's people, like, a lot of people don't realize that's like you said, like the metrics of the day are dictated by a lot of things. You know, it's like, obviously there are outliers, but when you see, you know, how some of the stats look like, you know, different, you know, when the pace of play, possessions, you know, all that stuff varies by the style of the era. We saw it throughout time, right? You saw like super high pace, you know, scoring and up and down, you know, in the 60s and things like that, just because of, you know, you're getting off quick shots and all this stuff. And then you saw it slow down, you know, with an introduction of various other rules, you know, things like that. Then we saw, you know, go to a crawl like in late 90s, early 2000s, because, yeah, there was kind of an inside-out game. Get a lot of dominant big men coming in there, and that was really the style. We saw the style change, and like now it's really just, and, you know, I think obviously defensive intensity was probably a lot higher too, you know, in some of these earlier eras, because, you know, of the various other reasons. But you have, yeah, like, it's just like you said, when people say can point to like a certain year or whatever players and try to use whatever metrics they want to discredit all these other eras or players, that's when you start, you know, getting into just being very disingenuous. You're not really a fan, and you know, you're just trying to push a narrative, but, you know, without really knowing what you're talking about. So, you know, it's pretty there. And I think that it's like, you know, people they're quick to try and do that when they, you know, when they're, like I said, it's really all just propping up a team or an era or something like that. It's about certain players. It's not really just about trying to understand the game.
Yeah, no, it's pretty ridiculous. Woodage is in here saying that the left-handed argument has been around since the late 2000s. I don't remember hearing that, but maybe. I don't remember hearing that.
I think, obviously, I mean, you might be right, Woodage, but like Dart said, I think that a lot of these things are just so much more prevalent now because of, you know, how intense this debate stuff is, you know. And so then you just see this stuff thrown up everywhere, all over social media, just, you know, nonsensical takes like, oh, players couldn't use their left hand, which is, I mean, has been debunked thoroughly by us and, you know, all these other content creators multiple times. So, I mean, it's just, you know, we tend to try to ignore things like that, but it, you know, gets harder.
They say Happy Kobe Day. Happy Kobe Day, 8/24.
Yes.
Casual entered the studio for a second.
Oh yeah.
But then he left.
I shot him the link there. I was like, okay. Yeah, we'll get his take on there if he comes back. But that's yeah, Kobe Day, and I wish he was still with us. But I was gonna say also, yeah, like, what are some of the more ridiculous, like, obviously you said we kind of broke down, but I guess some of the driving motivations do you think like are behind like some of these casual takes?
It's I think largely about perspective is that people can't sympathize or empathize with other eras of putting yourself in the shoes of somebody that hasn't experienced the now. So, for instance, if somebody living in the 1960s and never heard of LeBron James or Michael Jordan, or the 50s or whatever time period, you just do it chronologically, and people don't want to put their experience as a fan and superimpose themselves in their imagination in a certain place and time to really to get an understanding of how great these people are across time. Because especially when you get older and you start experiencing longer lengths of anything, but let's talk basketball. You know, when I was a little kid, that's when Michael Jordan was out near the end of his career. So I got to see that as a, near 10-year-old at the height of his career. So to me, that was magical, but I got to see that transition to the now, obviously. And so much has happened. So for me, it's my experience is all of that. So I can't, I haven't experienced the Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, everything in the past, but even just taking my experience, for example, how am I going to say that what I watched or what have you is that something was better or worse? To just say it just is in respect to that this era's competition is better or worse. I don't think you can. I think it's always, you just play every year and you figure out who the best is that year. And there's not really a transition point. It's just you go year by year and players come and players go. It's the NBA. Every time the teams are just against each other.
Yeah, no, and I mean that's I think one thing that's kind of lost on these people is that, it's not ever like it's been the same way throughout, all the time. Is the best teams, they always rise to the top at the end, during the playoffs, and they play each other. It's not like the team with the best record plays a random team in the NBA for the title. It doesn't work that way. And I mean it's the same back then, it's the same now. Rises to the top. The best players play against each other multiple games, so I mean, if you're the one thing I have said, and this is, I don't want this to be taken, is I think that the only thing that I will say is that when you're talking about a certain aspect of the game, like 3-point shooting, obviously that's something that is emphasized in today's game, for various reasons. And obviously that's just a skill that's stressed, and I think that when you're looking at things like scouting and drafting, teams look at that, and for that reason, you can say that maybe teams are, as far as shooting the ball goes, at the three, that it's like they're deeper 1 through 12, but as far as just teams being flat out better because of the year they play in, that's ridiculous. Like you said, and I think that it's whenever you hear that, like I said, it's just the teams that play each other are great at certain things, offensively, defensively. They're there for a reason, and that's like I've heard someone say recently, like they were talking about the '93 Suns, and they were trying to talk disparagingly of them because their defense was mediocre during the regular season, and I'm like, okay. You're not talking about their strengths. You're not talking about who they beat to get there to the finals. You're not talking about what made that team go. You're just looking at, like you said, a stat, like a stat nerd, and like one stat at that, ignoring everything else, no context, and you're just trying to push a narrative like that. So that was an easy one to debunk.
Well, aircraft carrier in here is saying the game evolved, so the players got better. The game is played differently now. It's more focused on the 3-point shot. So can you honestly tell me that today's players are just as good of post players as they were in the 90s or the 2000s? I don't think you can say that with a straight face. I think people are focusing on the 3-point shot, and that's what they're looking for when they draft these players, stat nerds. And so you have a lot of guys that are coming in that are shooting better, and they're practicing that because that's what they're focusing on. It's the stat nerds tell the coaches, or the whole dynamic of that, we need to shoot more 3-pointers to win. the Moneyball version of basketball. So, yeah, you can't say it with a straight face because it's not true. And again, and even if you even if everyone became as good as Kyrie Irving per se as a dribbler, because they're focusing on these skills, how does that translate into the NBA? Do you win basketball games? Because there's still the team dynamic to it too. So, who knows if these 3-point teams again would have beat the '96 Bulls or something, because they hardly shot any 3 points in comparison to these teams, and we don't know who would have won. But I think there's a good and again, also the rules, etc. Just the time machine basketball stuff is just getting out of hand, in my opinion.
No, great point. And I mean, that's like you said, that's why it's so hard to be straight up, compare teams and be who would win, because, they would, they almost certainly wouldn't play the same way against these teams, right? If they were scouting each other out, you would see them completely different. The 2018 Warriors wouldn't play the '96 Bulls like they would the 2018 Lakers. You would see their maybe 3-point production. All this stuff would change. And, especially what rules are we going by, a lot, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And one thing I also want to touch on is that, to push these arguments, a lot of times you see they'll point to certain players, like you kind of mentioned, in order to say, oh, we never saw a guy like that. They'll point to an outlier, oh, nobody dribbled like Kyrie, or, even going back as far as Iverson, when in fact there were guys who are, they're outliers. There are superstars in every era who were great and excelled at certain things, And one thing that's universally true is not every player on every team is a superstar, right? Has never been the case.
Yeah.
You never have, an era where everyone is just no. You have role players. You have guys who are brought in for certain reasons, defense, offense, whatever the case is. It's like a chess game, and that's been the case throughout all of NBA history, right? You build a team based upon your scheme, your style, and what you want to do, and the styles change.
Yeah, absolutely. Travis, I'm having really bad internet connection here.
Okay.
I don't know if do you want to keep going, but I can try to log out and come back, but I don't know. I've been having issues the last couple of days. I was having issues on Rex's stream, or when I did the stream with Rex yesterday too.
Yeah, no worries. Why don't you? Yeah, you can try to log out and come back in. If it doesn't fix it, then we can just wrap up. No problem.
Okay, I'll be right back.
Yep. But what do you guys here in the chat think about that? As far as this conversation. Obviously, you've heard this if you've been in social media at all or watched any type of, sports talk show. Within the last 5, 6, 7 years, you've seen these takes, and specifically this one about how, NBA competition is magically better as time goes on, just across the board. But for, the reasoning is just very shaky, right? And as we're discussing here, obviously we're talking about how the competition is in certain things, players are practiced in certain things. But like Dark said, are you saying that all these players have, in the 90s, there was an emphasis on post play, more ball movement as far as, trying to get an open, shot, because things were stagnant. The game is a little bit slower, obviously, than it is now. And, players their mentality was focused on different things. They weren't trying to shoot 40 or 50 threes a night. All right. And, things like that. But, if you, like I said, if you want to make a nuanced argument, that, obviously, things are much better, then again, like I said, I think it's a very nuanced argument. You can't just say, era is better because XXX time passes by. And Aircraft Carrier, it said, I am about stats, but statistics or stats don't really tell you the entire story of, especially, like I said, all the time. I mean, if you're just going by points per game of eras, then what was the 60s the greatest era of basketball history? Right? No. we know why stats exist in context relative to certain players, certain eras. And like I said, it has nothing to do with just the overall skill level, right? Because you can't make that argument without just being inconsistent. Now, like I said, I believe this is the deepest the league has ever been. Okay, as far as just, everyone being hyper focused on basically shooting the three ball, being good at that, being an option off the bench, especially, or your starters 1 through 5. You want to get that high percentage up. You want players who can, preferably shoot the ball, create their own shot, things like that. So, and what I mean by that, Aircraft Curry, is when teams are drafting or looking at different players. Okay, it's deepest as far as more players, obviously, that can shoot the ball, especially the three ball, more than ever before. Okay, that's what I meant there. As far as just other players coming off the bench with no super defined role, you can make that argument, but I still don't think it pushes the era argument any further. Okay, so I mean, and like I said, you're welcome to disagree, but I said, come up and make the argument. Like, what do you disagree on, and why? More importantly, shout out to Eric Cracker though, and shout out to Woodage, and I see Roe in the chat. And let's see, we will, just because obviously, wait a second here. Actually, go ahead and drop the link here when we see what's going on with Dart's channel, the connection here. If anyone does want to go up and just very quickly come up and give their 2 cents on what we're discussing here, is competition better? Okay, and from era to era, why or why not? Okay, and what are you using to make that claim? That's what we are interested in here. You can say it, well, but why would you, or how are you making that argument? Okay, and so, it's a very divisive topic, I think, and like we were talking about earlier, you really just see these, this type of argument just to usually elevate certain players above another player or set of teams, whatever the case is. You don't really see them argue for, just to talk the game, right? So links in the chat. If anyone wants to come up and give it a go. Let's check in with Dart. Are you there? It seems he's looking a little bit better on your end.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep the camera off to see if that helps.
Okay, sure. But yeah, if you were kind of cut them on what I said there, basically, was kind of answering Eric Curry's question about how the league is. I think, like I said, as far as just players who can shoot the three ball, I think it's obviously a little bit deeper. But like I said before, it's obviously we know that there's an emphasis on that, and just like how there was an emphasis on, like you said, post play and being proficient at that. So,
yeah, I think that. Yeah, he was talking about the deepest how. I don't know. I'm looking at some of these. And then he said, "You're the main Statner now. You're moonwalking."
And I mean, obviously, I disagree with that. I don't think I'm backtracking in any way. And like it's like stats are great, right? But they are only relative to whatever era they're playing in, right? And we know there's context behind those stats. Yeah. And like it pointed out the 60s, like
that's.
Oh, good.
Sorry, it lagged for me, so I couldn't see you. But what I was going to say is that that's why I like looking at statistical titles, because that just defines who had the most during the season, and it is different, like because of the rules. Like for Will Chamberlain, I mean, what he did was impressive either way. But when he got 50 points per game, they were able to pass. They were able to inbound pass the basketball over the backboard. He would catch it and then drop it into the basket. There was no offensive goaltending, not basket interference. But the aspect of is that if you were to shoot the ball, yeah, you'd be able to grab it and then be able to dunk it in. Not quite an alley-oop, because he would just grab the ball and just put it in, essentially. It wasn't a pass. So, that's different. than being able to get, 50 points in even today's era, even with the massive 3-point shots or what have you, all the different examples. But the rules and the play style influence the amount of points that you get.
Yeah, 100%.
Aircraft carrier said you destroyed the game.
Destroyed the game? How's that? Yeah,
I mean, with stats.
How would you destroy the game? I mean, like I said, I'm not like, obviously stats have their place, right? Player's choice destroyed my love for basketball. Oh no. Well, this is why this channel exists here, Aircraft Carrier. Like, we're trying to get away from, these narratives, right? Which I think you're right. A lot of the kids, like when you watch guys like Nick Wright and, Shannon Sharp, all these guys who just talk narratives, right? They don't talk, they really don't talk the game. They just push, opinions, theories. They don't really dissect or break it down, right? Like, you see it all the time. Like when you were looking at LeBron's podcast with, like that he has now. Like, you see different guys like, Draymond Green. All these guys come up there and they're really just saying, oh, like you heard of LeBron said, my team wasn't good enough to win in 2011. He like literally came up and said that. That's a narrative, right? He's not gonna throw out stats or break it down as to why. He's certainly not gonna take responsibility for that series. But like, we're trying to get to a point where we can actually objectively talk about why things happen, and instead of just trying to talk in a way that favor our favorite players or teams or whatever era is our favorite, right? So that's what we're trying to get away from, right, in totality. Let's see here.
Yeah, Rex says there's no evolution to it. There's change, not the same thing. And that's what I was trying to say earlier with the 3-point shooting. It's not that people couldn't shoot 3 points. It's just what they're practicing now. It doesn't mean that there isn't somebody who has the potential to be a fantastic post player today, but they're not practicing it. So you got Jokic. I'm not saying that he's a bad post player or anything, but you got Jokic destroying people partly because they don't practice defending it as much, and then they don't have and they don't practice it offensively, holistically as much either.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's really just the era, the style of the day. And that you're 100% right. That's not really a reflection on the players and their skill level. It's just what is emphasized in the game from that time. And yeah, like Rex said, that's absolutely right. It doesn't evolve. It just you change the way it's played for whatever reason. There's an emphasis on different ways. Aircraft Carrier asks, why is LeBron better than Kobe? Now, like I said, I think Kobe's was better than LeBron at certain things, right? I think he had better footwork. I think he was way better at getting his actual own shot from anywhere in the court. I think he had better handles. I think he was consistently a better defender than LeBron throughout the entirety of his career, up until a certain point, obviously. But the reason why I have LeBron ranked higher than Kobe, right? Not necessarily better, but just greater, right? Is because LeBron's resume is, say what you want about voted on awards, but LeBron's resume is just so much better than Kobe, right? He has, well, I don't need to break it down for you. I'm sure you're well aware of it. He destroys them in accolades and achievements, right? And I'm not even going to go statistically, right? Like, because their styles of game is different, things like that. Kobe played a certain way, but LeBron beats him there. And I mean, like I said, if you want to say Kobe Bryant was the better basketball player and you want to make an argument, I'm not mad at that. But I don't rank players based on best. Otherwise, you'd have a completely different list that I'm sure you have or anyone else. And greater is, as we talked about many times, is 1,000% different than better. What are your thoughts on that? As far as LeBron versus Kobe.
So for their careers, I think there's two ways you can look at a career, and I think the fairest way to to approach it is to just take in consideration both of these aspects that I'm about to talk about. One, you can, in summation, however you want to measure it, look at somebody's career and say, well, this is what they've done, add it all up together. Now, if you do that and you're taking icon and all of the intangibles out of it, I think that LeBron James so far has had a greater holistic career than Kobe Bryant. However, there's the other way you can look at it. You can look at it as what was their peak, or how did they perform on average during their career? So you can add it or you can average their career. In that respect, I think Kobe Bryant had a greater career on average than LeBron James did, winning the All-NBA first teams and all defensive teams in the same year over and over again. He got the All-Star Game MVPs. People are laughing about that when I bring that up. But what the All-Star Game is supposed to be, and what it was in a lot of respects back in the day, was the greatest players playing against each other in a game to see who would win, and they would divide it by their conference in the past. So when you do that and you have somebody be honored as the best player in that game for their All-Star MVP, to me, that means something. Now, today, I understand why people have a different perspective today, because that game that they play today is hot garbage. But, but it did mean something. People did try to play. Again, I'm not saying it was the NBA championship where they're going to try and risk injury or anything, potentially. But just the point of it is that it was a fantastic exhibition. And I just think people just take that away. Anyway, I like to look at it both. I like to look at that in two different ways. And then I think the only fair way to measure it is putting it together. Mm-hmm. And I think I have LeBron James. I don't remember. I have to look at it again. But in the average, he's barely a top 10 player on average.
On average?
Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about
in respect to the measuring, how I measure it. Okay. On average, he's barely a top 10 player, but in total, he's number 3.
Yeah. I mean that's fair. I still think that you could argue, especially that he had one of the better peaks of all time too. But I mean, I think you're right. I mean, especially if we were just talking their best. What Kobe was garnering, first team All NBA and All Defense every year. He was either tops or at the top league in scoring, and he was playing two ways. But you're right. I think there's different ways of measuring, but different players' greatness. But like I said, I just think that I have Kobe's or LeBron's career as greater when I'm ranking him personally. Now, King Speech says Kobe was better at winning. I mean, he has another ring, sure. I mean, if we're talking about just the ring count, absolutely. And like Rex said, that is why you play the game. And Kobe actually emphasized that. That was Kobe's drive and motivation, was to win that ring. And it killed. I think that he had a higher drive than most other players in the league, especially LeBron James. But before we got Casual and King Speech in the back, and bring up just I just want to address this really fast. This question, Aircraft Carrier says, if you're going to war, who you want in the foxhole, LeBron or Kobe? So I mean, are we just talking one game? I mean, obviously our actual war, obviously Kobe Bryant. But I mean, if we're just talking one game or one series, they're doing different things great. I think LeBron obviously is a higher IQ passer. I mean, I'm not trying to discredit Kobe in that regard, but I'm just saying I think that LeBron does things a little bit better than Kobe. Kobe does things better than LeBron. It's their play styles are wildly different. I think LeBron has honed his game, especially in the 3-point, out of necessity. And that's, I mean, Kobe was a decent 3-point shooter too, but it's really I'm not mad if someone picks Kobe over LeBron, for any reason, right? Not at all. I'm a huge Kobe guy. He's my second favorite player of all time, next to James Worthy. But I mean, if you're just, if you're trying to put him higher than LeBron all time, I just need to know why, right? If you want to pick him for any, pick a basketball game, I'm not mad. do it. But putting him above someone whose resume is objectively far better for an overall ranking, to me, is just, you need to justify that other than just ring count, because that's disingenuous. Let's bring up Casual and King Speech there. How are you guys doing?
It's going fine.
Yes,
It's fine, man.
Yes, sir.
Well, before we get to I know you guys want to respond to the Kobe, but maybe
No, I didn't even
in.
hear. I didn't even hear.
Well, I was breaking down me and Dart were discussing we were answering this question here, Casual, about, he asked me why I have LeBron over Kobe. And I'm, like I said, I kind of nuanced it. I said I only have him over Kobe because of resume. I'm not saying he was a better player in certain aspects. I'm just saying best and greater are different to me. But I want to get you guys' takes really fast on the actual topic, which was, obviously we hear people, mainly social media and these bad shows, trying to push the era argument. Usually it's, in relation to the GOAT debate or whatever. But what is you guys' take on competition fluctuating? Does it fluctuate, or is it just completely dependent on the style and players of the day? Is it better?
Can I start here?
Yeah, you were here. There, go ahead.
All right, no problem. So I'll start with I'll talk like Rex, or I think what Rex would say, and I think any era. So you take the '60s, right? However many teams, you could assume that those were the best 100 players on the court, right? And you get the 20 teams, right? It's 240, right? Because it was 12-man teams, right? Now they got 15-man teams. So if you go by era, you just got to assume that the best player. Now you could say in the '60s, right? Some guys did other things, went to other sports, went to other endeavors because they wasn't millionaires. But let's assume that the best players in the world were playing in the NBA. All right. I mean, the Euro. I mean, once post '92, there's a certain, a lot of Euro guys came over because obviously they took the ban off of competing for your country if you had an NBA contract. So again, let's assume that the best players in the world were playing in the NBA. Then at that point, you respect what you see on the court. I don't think there's a fluctuation in competition. I don't think there's you played a certain style that was going to win. So that's when I judge GOAT. That's what I look at. The only thing was the segregation. When the league was segregated, right? When there was no, obviously when that Sweetwater Clifton became the first African American to play in the NBA, and you stop having much segregation in the NCAA, then things can change a little bit. But at the end of the day, you just got to take the best professional basketball players. The NBA was probably always the best professional league in the world, and there you go. And there you go. You judge what they do from there. The MVP is the MVP. The rookie of the year is the rookie of the year, right? Coach of the year, rebounding title, scoring title. You want to tell me Oscar Schmidt could have came over and won scoring titles? I don't know. It never, unfortunately, never happened. But at the end of the day, that's how you judge it. So the era thing is really, really kind of overdone. I think it's sort of when we try to compare these GOATs from era to era, you're trying to look for reasons. You know what I'm saying? You're trying to look for reasons. I can understand when you use true shooting percentage, right? The true shooting percentage in the 80s, because we had a couple of debates on FYF like this, right? The true shooting percentage in the 80s was around 53 for the league average. Now it's around, because of the three-point shot, it's around 57, 58. Okay, when you judge true shooting percentage, you have to era adjust it like any other sport. You know what I'm saying? So it's like a 200-yard game, a 200-yard passer in football in the 70s. That was elite. Now 200 yards is nothing, right? You know what I'm saying? It's guys throw for 500 yards based on the way they call plays now. So that's just all I'll say on that.
What do you think, Kettle?
I mean, just really to tell you the truth, I don't really disagree with much that Rose said. I think that true shooting is like it's one way to be able to decipher the standard that was held for, players, teams, league wide during a certain time period, and then you go and you start to look at specific players and their schemes and their skill set, their style of play, and you start to decipher what was the standard and how did they exceed it, right? And so, like, I feel like when we're talking about like competition, we're talking about competition in eras specifically. It's really dependent on a certain player or team or a couple, and how the league is able to keep up with them relative to what they have going on in the league, right? So like I think during the 90s, I think the Bulls, the Phoenix Suns, when they, especially once they got Charles Barkley and Karl Malone and the Stockton Utah Jazz, they were the standard of how to build a team, right? Well-roundedness, having an identity, and a lot of teams were trying to keep up with them. Whereas I think like the 2000s, I think it was a flux of talent that was fighting for the top spot because they all had the ability to be able to impact the game at an exceptional level, right? The Duncans, the KGs, the Kobes, the Shaquille O'Neals, especially on the latter half, the LeBrons, the D Wades, right? And so like I think that competition, it varies, right, on what are you looking for in terms of impact, right? So yeah, from that standpoint, yeah, I agree with Ro. Like holistically, like it just depends on what is the standard. How are you, trying to meet that standard, and who exactly are you measuring yourself to?
Yeah, Dart, you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, I think we've been talking about this for some time. That's essentially what I've been talking about this entire time, is that, you play in your era and you're the best in your era, and the eras have different priorities in respect to what they look at in a player. The NBA is famously called a copycat league. And people just try to mimic things. And the last, I don't want to say the last great player, but the one that's really made a huge difference for trying to mimic excellence or greatness is the league's trying to mimic Steph Curry. And the matter of fact is you're not going to mimic Steph Curry. You're not going to get another Steph Curry, because Steph Curry is one of one in respect to what he does. So, but they're trying to do that by getting these elite 3-point shooters. Now, it's worked in its own way. It's how the league is playing. It's not my cup of tea in respect to watching the game. However, in respect to them being competitive, it's how they're approaching the game right now. So, but yeah, no, I don't think that it's, that. The capability of these players across time. I got really bad lag. So anyway, yeah. I don't got much else to say. It's fine.
You know what I think happened, and it's so funny because I think Don Nelson is the pioneer of this. I think the pioneer of this era, this modern era, is Don Nelson. And I always wondered, right? Because I used to go back. I used to just kind of like try to make up teams in my head. I mean, really, I'm a weird guy where I used to just make up leagues and stuff in my head with fictional players, right? You know how people do it on it's all fictional players, right? The whole alternate universe. I used to wonder when we were playing back when the league was all spinner, power forward, small forward, shooting guard, point guard, right? I used to wonder what would happen if a team tried to try to actually play in the NBA or play at any level with all wings or like three, you basically small forwards. You put your five best small forward. Because one thing I've noticed over time is small forward really kind of dictates the way you play. He's like he's the link between the backcourt and the front court. So Don Nelson was the first guy you seen at the NBA level in 2007 to kind of throw out the play position as basketball. People credit D'Antoni with that, but no, even he, because he just basically moved everybody over. Like Amari was a 4, he put him in a 5. Marion was a 3, put him at the 4. So he pretty much slowed everybody over and ran that style. But Don Nelson in 07 against Dirk and them put out a team. He put out his best 4 guards and basically Matt Barnes as the one front court player, and they took out the Dallas Mavericks, who were the first seed. If y'all remember. And it was like, okay, now that pretty much 4 years before, no, 2 years before Steph got drafted, really 4 or 5 years before he became an all-star or player worth mentioning, that pretty much gave Steph the land in the Golden State Warriors the landing to become what they were. If everybody remembers, David Lee got hurt in the beginning of that first championship season in the preseason. And Draymond Green was not a starter. He was a 6th man. He was coming off the bench. Draymond Green wound up being, okay, I'll make him my 4. I won't force another 6'9", 6'10" guy in there. And I'll go with Draymond Green, who's pretty much 6'6", and I'll make him my 4, put him next to Bogut, and we'll go from there. And they came out 15-0. And it showed you that, hey, you can play this positionless style. If Draymond Green was a good enough rebounder and defender, you didn't have a lot of big men that was gonna take advantage of Draymond Green, and here you go. So again, there's that style now has become, they want to copycat that style, and the league is trying to copycat that style, and obviously teams full of 4 to 5 3-point shooters are the way to go. You can't really. We're at the point now where you cannot have just a guy who rebounds but cannot shoot the 3. You might be able to get away with 2 guys that can't shoot the 3, but pretty much if you don't have 3 guys that can shoot the 3 on the court at all times, that's it. Back in the day, back in the 90s, you would have 1 or 2 3-point shooting specialists. Everybody else is mid-range, post players, and everything else. So again, when you look at things, you just gotta understand how the game was played. Like I said, when I first pulled over in Almanac, I went back to 1946, and I figured out who was the best player. And Jumping Joe Fulks, the first superstar of the NBA. Right? Era by era, you start to see who's the best scorer, who's the best winner. When you start to understand that Bill Russell,
Neil Johnston.
Neil Johnson was another one. I mean, again, Joe Fulks he had won the first scoring title, averaging 23. I don't think anybody else averaged more than 16, right, or something like that. If I, these are just things when I was 11 years old, pulling open the almanacs. There's no Google. There's no, the internet. I didn't have a house computer. You understand what I'm saying? So,
but I don't know. I don't think that I think to your point about having 3, spacers on the floor, I feel like it was always pivoting towards that once they realized the value of the 3-point shot. Once Bird set the standard of how impactful spacing the floor and forcing defenses to bend at your personal skill set, I think the league was always pivoting to that point. I just think that at this point now we're at a standstill in terms of figuring out the value of spacing. So a Bam Adebayo, doesn't shoot 3s frequently at all, right? If you see him shoot a 3, it'll surprise you. But he finds other ways to force the defense to bend. A player like Zion Williamson. Zion doesn't take 3s at all. He's a slasher galore. But the way in which he finds a way to force the defense to shift towards him while he's on the perimeter, because they don't want him to gain, momentum. I think that we're at the point right now in NBA history where we're trying to where players and teams are figuring out different ways to be able to how do we shift the defense? How do we create openings to make a more efficient offense? I think I feel you for the majority of it. I just think that we're at a point right now where we're trying to figure out the dynamics of how to space the floor. There's different ways to skin a cat type shit.
Yeah, and again, you talk about guys like Zion and Bam, they have a certain what they call gravity, right? Where they're drawing defenders in a way to keep Zion has a certain amount of gravity. obviously again the post up plays back to the basket. So I'm really looking right now at the 3-point evolution, right? And I go year by year. The first year where teams average over 20 3-point attempts a game was 2013. That was LeBron's last MVP year. Now you're at the point this year where 37.6 was the league average, right? So, yeah, the first explosion obviously was the line shortening, right? That was meant. That's what the first year it went from 9.9 to 15.3, and then 20, and then it steadily went up. 2017, once they saw that the Warriors were not going away, because I remember even Charles Barkley was like, "This can't win. This is not winning basketball, right?" And obviously they get KD. They win in 17. They win in 18, and everybody's been copycatting since. So it's like even like think about that. Even you're talking about 8 years of this 3-point revolution, where look, I'm looking at overall field goal attempts. You're talking about. What, this is like 40% now of all shots, 3-point shots. Well, is LeBron's last MVP, you're talking less than 25%. So, you just when people look at stats, and that's why when you talk about stats with context, that matters. You understand what I'm saying? That's what, and I can guarantee you, right? If you go and look at the field goal, field goal, the weighted field goal percentage, EFG,
effective
field goal percentage. I'm sure that with the 3-point shot and with the 3-point shot attempts, those went up as well, because again, that's the math formula. But that's what people get in trouble. Because when you look at that, if you look at basketball as a math formula, and finally, I guess the analytics guys won. Hey, play this way because this makes sense. Shoot more threes. It's a better percentage shot.
League wide, yes, it has gone up. But like the players that are like abnormalities, they're still at the top of the top. Like Shaquille O'Neal is still at the top when it comes to effective field goal percentage, because it doesn't matter how many threes you can crack. You're not, what I'm saying? You're not Shaq. Like Shaq was able to generate shots at ease. Hakeem Olajuwon, you're not him. You know what I'm saying? So like, I feel like I think when it comes to like, because I think I know where you're going with it, contextualizing scoring in today's game and using those true shooting and effective field goal percentages like statistical categories, I think that is a great context to add in the sense of you were in an era where you had a focal point of your offense naturally puts you at an advantage compared to prior eras. But I think it's also the ability to knock it down at a higher rate than league average. They should also go noticed as well. Like a person like I don't want to use Curry because Curry is like, what I'm saying, like Curry's Curry. But like using somebody like Harden. Harden is above average for his era by, I want to say, I could check for sure, but I think it's by like +5 percentage wise, right? In terms of effective field goal percentage and true shooting percentage for his era. But we understand that a large portion of his shot dosage was shooting threes. But when you're knocking it down at that rate, even compared to your era, understanding that your era shoots more threes than before, that's still a very valuable asset as a scorer that you can knock it down. Plus, like 4 out of 12 attempts, 5 out of 11. Like that's a valuable asset. So I think that context is necessary, but there are some outliers where it's like, even if you add the context, it only boosts their case.
Yeah. You want to kind of get, that's a great point too. And I think that's kind of a universally accepted truth is that, yeah, like you said, there are outliers or, superstars in every player that, would easily slide into any era, right? And you have the people who excel in any era. And to kind of answer that question, or I guess get everyone's take on that, with the Kobe thing, I think I'm not to go down the rabbit hole too far because obviously I'm a huge Kobe stan as far as, I think that he's top 10 and I've debated such, but I think when you're talking about, I think we touched upon this, but when you're just talking about ranking players all the time, like I think a lot of players put him over LeBron as far as their ranking simply because of the ring count. But I mean, I know that all of us have more and more, I guess, nuanced ranking system. But what do you think about just using rings to put players over, regardless of totality of resume? Is it legit, or obviously it's a thing?
It depends on how nuanced your.
Let me start, Ro. I haven't talked in like 15 minutes.
You got
it. I think with the championship rings, just excusing everything the rest of a resume is not the right way to go. Now, I think the opposite is true too. To excuse the rings as not being part of the resume, I think is the wrong thing to do as well. I think it is a measurement. I think it's important. Now, for example, if we talk greater, not better, I think that if there was a player, hypothetically, no specifics, if there was a player that averaged, I don't know, 10 points per game and 3 rebounds, 3 assists, something like that, but the point of it never got awarded any sort of all-star, any sort of all-NBA, any sort of anything. I think a guy who's won a championship, who's got less stats than that, is a greater basketball player because they were associated with the team. They were playing on that team that won a championship. So I think that's a way. I think that's a way to measure it. In respect to the Kobe thing versus LeBron, I think Kobe, like I said, we talked about a little bit earlier. I think there's 2 ways to look at how people are greater than each other. Is the totality of a career by adding it like in summation, adding everything up per season that they played and then putting it together and looking at the result, or you can average everything that they did and then look at it that way. So I think Kobe on average had a better or a greater career than LeBron James. However, I think in total, LeBron James had a greater career. So I think rings do matter. I think it's a matter of, again, it's whatever you think, but they wouldn't be lauded as much. They wouldn't be talked about as much. And obviously, that's the whole point of playing every season is to win the championship. So I think it matters.
Casual.
Real quick, C-Dub says casual speech being civil on the panel. I'm being civil because Ro hadn't said nothing stupid yet. No, I think when it comes to like ring counting in terms of making making a greater case, you guys have heard me say it multiple times on here, and I'm synonymous with it. I believe that it's just a falsified way of valuing a person's career. I think a person's career is far more valuable when you contextualize their impact to the game. Now you can use their run to the championship to be able to sort of add the confirmation of how dominant they were as a player, i.e. Shaquille O'Neal in 2000, i.e. Kobe Bryant in 2010. But I think that just blindly using rings, the rings that they won in X year to be able to put them over a player B, I think that is a very flawed way to value a person's career, because when going to a person like Kobe Bryant, I think Kobe Bryant's career in terms of how he was able to impact the game in a myriad of different ways, being essentially a chameleon in terms of whatever they needed him to be. In the first three-peat, gradually coming from a defensive stopper that could also be able to put the ball on the floor and create opportunities, to by the end of the three-peat being a bona fide superstar, being able to score at heights that mimic Shaquille O'Neal while also being able to still have some level of defensive value and facilitating chops, growing like more well-rounded. I think that is more of an accurate depiction of who Kobe Bryant is, rather than he won 3 championships in a row. I think to somebody like LeBron James, blindly just looking at 4 championships, his record of 4-10, rather than mentioning all of the ways in which he impacted himself well, not impacted himself, but impacted the team while also being able to lay forth his versatility in a myriad of different ways. Like when he goes to Miami and he's having to learn to be more imposing of a scorer, learning to be more willing to score in the post rather than just settling for at the top of the key slashes. Because somebody mute their mic real quick. You know what I'm saying? And then by the time he gets to Cleveland, being more reliable of a floor spacer. Like I think that like those are more valuable, in my opinion. I think those are more valuable assessments. Hey Scott, mute up, bro. I think that those are more valuable of assessments on these players rather than just blindly just pointing to the championships that they won or their finals record.
I can agree more, and just we'll get it. Everyone's takes here too, but Aircraft Carrier, that's not true, man. I absolutely count defense. In fact, my top 5 are who I consider the best two-way players of all time, right? But to go with your point, guys, I think we're in lockstep on that. Is that just using? I mean, if you're contributing to winning consistently, and obviously you have the Finals MVPs, I think that boosts your case. But you're right. There's a lot that goes into winning a championship beyond one player's greatness, right? And regardless of how great they can be, night in, night out, you have to be in many ways in a lucky situation, right? To have consistently great roster, especially if you're going to string together multiple titles, to put yourself in there. A lot of stuff has to go right. Players want to have to stay injury free, things like that, not, season in and season out. And a lot of that's beyond their control. And so, do I use rings to some degree? Sure. But when you're talking about just players when you're ranking them, I believe that that's probably, to me, one of the least important parts of the overall, measurement is just the ring count. Like I said, I'm not going to put, what's a good example? I'm not going to put like Dirk Nowitzki over Karl Malone just because he has one ring, right? I think Karl Malone's still a greater player than Dirk Nowitzki all time. But I'm not going to use same thing with John Stockton. I'm not going to put Gary Payton over John Stockton because Gary Payton won an ancillary ring in 2006, right? And so I still think John Stockton is that guy. But it's just like that, the totality of a resume, and that's why obviously we put I think LeBron over Kobe just to answer his question. But I think we're all kind of share that same opinion. But let's get Scott's take on that. On whatever you want to comment on, Scott. You talk about eras, or are we talking about how we rank players? What's your take?
Eras. We should, first of all, we should do relative to era. How great were you against your comp? Not this. How great what if you can play in this era? That's first take. And first of all, the reason why today's NBA needs the spacing, go look at the 2000s. Guys like Kobe, T-Mac, they weren't really maximized enough because they didn't have the floor spacing to help their weaknesses. And even in 80s and 90s era utilized spacing better than the 2000s because the 2000s were running more big lineups. They're running more slashers instead of a 3-point shooter specialist. And I think the 90s Rockets, people love to say the Suns, but the 90s Rockets really show how valuable floor spacing can be. Because they had a dominant big man in the post, and they got elite shooters on the yes.
Oh no, not you. I was going to ask Travis if I could be able to answer the question that Carrie.
Yeah, after Scott's taking
after Scott. Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I think the '90s Rockets helped maximize Akeem's ability to win a championship because before what's the coach names? I can't remember the coach name. But before Akeem got there, they weren't really using like that to his fullest potential. When once they got floor spacing, they can stretch the floor, and defenses back then had to either help on Akeem or they can let Akeem cook in the post. Like the Kings, the Suns, the Mavericks, there are teams that they were ahead of their time, like playing positionless basketball. And I think teams like the 2010s looked at that saying, if they can be dominant in an era where and it's quite it's, it's quite what's the word? Uh, it's quite. I don't understand how the Kings and the Suns were not able to win championships with those rosters because they were ahead of their time. They're a push to pace, very force based team, but they were still able to not win the championship. So I think, and I think the Heat went a next wave with that, but the Heat had defenders. They were able to play small, able to have floor spacers like Shane Battier and uh, Chris Anderson, Norris Cole that can space out the floor. They had guys like Chris Bosh and LeBron who could play at the 4 or 5, be solid rim protectors. And I think the Warriors maximized it to its fullest potential. And I think the Rockets, even though people say they took too many threes, which to a certain extent that's true, they were almost able to win a championship unless Chris Paul didn't went down. So I think floor spacing mattered since the 80s because the 80s and 90s still had good floor space like uh, Dan Marley, uh, who was the role player in the Celtics? He was a great 3-point shooter. Uh, I can't
You
remember his
talking
name.
about Dana Barrows? There's a lot of guys that could shoot
Yeah,
back then. A lot of
yeah,
guys.
they
Mark
could shoot.
Price. Mark Price
Yeah,
was ahead of his time too.
Mark Price paved the way for a guy like Steve Nash. So yeah, I think spacing. Oh,
Yeah, I can see it. I can see it.
yeah.
We'll go ahead and take that question there.
Oh, yeah, because I don't want to spend too much time because I know Ro still wants to answer. Yeah, and so aircraft carrier. All basically what what floor spacing is like how effectively can an offensive player position themselves across the court to create wide open areas for ball handlers, cutters, shooters. You know what I'm saying? Forcing the defense to cover more ground. And we understand the laws of physics. The more area you have to cover, the more likely you are able to make a mistake. And so when we're saying it relative to this era, I think spacing is forcing defenses to sort of have a lot of mishaps in terms of back cuts and stuff like that. And that therefore it's allowing more opportunities at the rim, which is also tenfold opening more opportunities at the 3-point line. Does that make sense? I can give you an example if you need me to. Just let me know in the chat. But go ahead, Ro.
Yeah. So okay. So yeah. Well, so I'm gonna go back to the championships thing. Ring count is something I count, and as I say, it's a if I think players are equal, right? Like or in the neighborhood or ballpark as far as how good they were and how great they were, then ring count is gonna be my separator, right? Obviously you would have to be on I would have to think your top 10, and then I'm gonna say, okay, well, ring count. Like if you got 5 rings, this guy has 3. All right, now I'm gonna separate it. But then before I get to the ring count, I'm going to look at one thing that I consider. If everything was equal, right? Let's say we got 2 teams where Vegas got them 50-50, right? It's a whole pickle. There's no point spread, right? Even the 7-game series. Which star are you picking? Now, if I thought that both players had equal teams, if both players had equal teams, I'm picking LeBron. I'm picking Kobe over LeBron. And again, I'm going to look at just the history of it. It's the history of them in big series, similar opponents. Like Kobe played the Spurs many times. The Spurs were one of those teams, even when LeBron had Dwayne Wade, right, and Chris Bosh. They gave him fits. It was Boris Diaw and Danny Green and young Kawhi Leonard giving him fits. Well, early on, it was Bruce Bowen and all that triple teaming and double teaming. Again, Kobe could play the double team better. So, like in the midst of in the era of a Kobe versus LeBron, I'm going to consider that. And one thing when you talk, let's go back to errors, because I'm sitting here looking at the numbers. That's one thing I love, man. I don't sit there and go to Basketball Reference to make points. So when they sit there and say certain errors are bigger, faster, and stronger, I'm sitting here and looking at the whole numbers from 1946 until last year. The average player from 1969 on up was 6'7", around 205. Then one point it got to 220. It was only 4 years where the average player was below went back to 6'6", and that was for the previous 6 years. Then it went back to 6'7". So the idea of bigger, faster, stronger, because they would show you guys like Randy Smith doing the same dunks that Russell Westbrook and E. Rose could do back in the 70s. Like the bigger, faster, stronger thing is such a myth because the average player is been the same size for the past 40, 50 years. And that goes to show you now the only thing you're looking at is the play style, differential. And, again, as we see, the three-point shot was floor speed, right. Because they'll say on other channels, right, that I continue to do a lot of debates on, that guys didn't shoot the three back then because they couldn't shoot the three. Nonsense. Yeah, we watched Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf and the big, what is he, 56 now, 57? Just shoot the lights out of the ball. I mean, and this is the thing, the only thing that you can say about a guy like Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf is he played in an era where, number one, in his size, you better be a point guard. Like, he was really a two guard, but they made him into a point guard when he was really more of a scorer, and he didn't have the green light to shoot as many threes. If he played in this era, he would be celebrated.
I've always said that Abdul-Rauf is the greatest player in NBA history.
I mean, listen, he was the first jersey I ever owned, but he was an amazing player, man. He was an amazing scorer. He almost, he played 3 years at LSU and was challenging Pistol Pete scoring records in college.
So are you saying, Ro, that you don't think that athletes in today's sports, just the sports realm, basketball, football, all of that, are you saying that you don't think that they actually have evolved and become bigger, faster? Wow.
No, they haven't.
I don't think so either.
They haven't. Again, because you can look at film. Again, they'll show you. I saw, again, it was on Instagram. They were showing you all these amazing Russell Westbrook, Baron Davis. Look, Baron Davis was amazing, bro. They were just showing on AOH, the live stream over there. They were showing Baron Davis getting the 3-on-1, the dunk on the Karolinko. They did this in the 70s, guys. It just what we didn't have? They didn't film every game. These games weren't live. Wasn't millions of people watching. But guys, every move that they could do now, they could do back. Again, shout out Tom Chambers. Tom Chambers. Again, people will tell you Tom Chambers was Kevin Durant before Kevin Durant.
Whoa.
And that dunk on. See, again, I think you got to watch some film. Because that dunk he did on Mark Jackson, shout out to Mark Jackson, was fucking nasty. I know. See, it's so funny. Tom Chambers was more explosive than Kevin Durant, and every bit the scorer. If you look at context,
OKC KD clears Tom Chambers as explosive.
What were you saying, Travis?
So, Dart, I guess I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole and wrap it up pretty soon, but that, I guess, your take there on our athletes just, getting bigger and stronger. I think, and I'll get your take here in a second. I think we've come so far as obviously we have better dietary routines, better ways of working out, more efficient ways of building muscle. Things like, it's not that guys are just bigger and faster. That doesn't really make any sense. It's just that we have much better ways of
better training, better facilities.
Yeah. What's your take, Dart?
Yeah, it more or less goes along the lines of that. Is that it's more focused on. I don't want to say more focused on, but the aspect of the sports science inclusion into a lot of these professional teams is a lot more widespread. Wilt Chamberlain, if evolution, is real in this, why is Wilt Chamberlain behind everybody? Wilt Chamberlain, that's just one example. Now, there's also the aspect of is that the population has been growing dramatically. I think since the 60s and 70s. I think that the population is more than doubled. So you have more people in general that are coming in. But in respect to our people, bigger, stronger, faster, absolutely not. It's just a matter of how they're integrating these things into the professional sports or the college. It's another business aspect of it that they're bringing into it. It's not that people didn't train. Weight training. We were talking about it yesterday in the NBA. Bob Pettit was the first known weight trainer in the NBA, and then Wilt Chamberlain, and it's been evolving ever since. But the aspect of it is that it's not that people are bigger, stronger, faster. Evolution doesn't happen in 50 years. There's some aspects of sports science and it being more professional in respect to that business side of integrating that into the teams and such. But no, players are not bigger, stronger, faster at heart, because there's even a lot of in respect to, Rex likes to bring this up, the long jump record has been the same record since
1968.
The 60s, 70s.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hold on, I'm gonna share a link in the chat. I want to share a link in the chat what I'm looking at, and y'all can see for yourself. The average player is still 6'7", around 215, 220. Like it really hasn't
on this
moved.
flip pass too. Aircraft carrier. One second. I mean, and you might be right about that comment about Jack Johnson and Tyson Fury, but like I said, are you taking like Tyson Fury with all the film he's been able to watch, all the fighters he's been able to study, all of his equipment?
Travis.
I mean, Jack, that's an advantage.
Of course that's an advantage. That's evolution. Apple, yes, that's evolution. It's the absolute right word, because when it comes to technology, when it comes to training, when it comes to nutrition, equipment, those things have evolved to the point in which, yes, they're going to have a more advantageous situation now than they did back then.
I agree with that.
Into his point, into Rose's point of mentioning the league average of on Basketball Reference. One, I urge you to go and look at the NBA.com rather than Basketball Reference when it comes to exact data of weight, height, stuff like that. Basketball Reference, they miss with that very often. But even still, using a weight average or a height average does not describe bigger, stronger, because we've seen people that are 200 pound for pound be much stronger than somebody who's 230.
But this is what I mean, though.
Your weight doesn't decipher who's stronger. It just tells you how much weight you're carrying around.
But casual, this is what I mean. You're talking about training and techniques. You're also talking about the fact, in the 70s and the 80s, early 80s, an ACL tear, your career was over. You had to let it naturally heal. Obviously, yeah. So you have surgeries that can correct what used to be a career-ending injury.
Mm-hmm.
Those are all things that help today's player. But the actual genetics, see, again, as he said, now Wilt Chamberlain, right? We don't have a Wilt Chamberlain type beast. Even Giannis is not. If Wilt Chamberlain, we could clone him and stand him right next to Giannis. Giannis would look small next to Wilt Chamberlain. He would look lean. He would look thin next to, you know what I'm saying? So, but Wilt Chamberlain, as we said, he didn't shoot his DNA in anybody where they had a baby that came out with another Wilt. You understand what I'm saying?
Pause.
All the trim he claimed to have, we don't have another Wilt Chamberlain standing out there. So at the end of the day, it's.
But okay.
I want to read Can I read the definition of evolution? Now, yeah. I think we're talking about.
His lag kicked him.
Lag. Okay, I'll just throw it in, right? Abraham Lincoln was 6'5" in 1965.
What the?
Hold on. Please let me lick some cash.
Okay.
The reason why he was considered a abnormally tall human. Now, In 1965 and 2025, 160 years later,
history.
he's just considered a tall human. The reason why is because of nutrition from that era, not necessarily genetics. So again, yeah, what they, you would consider Abraham Lincoln like the equivalent of a 6'10" guy. But then as the Industrial Revolution and things like that,
when people mention sports being more advanced, who mentions them when they come out of the womb? Who mentions them before they reach their
but if
athletic prime?
you're talking scientific evolution, see, it's not evolution of the human. It does not work. It does not work where a guy can be that much taller. Yeah, we are talking about sports, and we're talking about heights and weights and sizes. And so right, we can sit there and tell you that yes, the training methods and the recovery methods and stuff like that. Yeah, the trainers and all this is a whole science that's into the game now that you can say yes is an advantage. But if I'm going to look back and they had one trainer, now you got a whole goddamn team now. Now you got 10 10-man coaching staff. You had one coach and one assistant coach back in the day. That's actually advantage. So everything I'm going to look at from back then, they didn't have certain advantages. Yes. I'm going to even look.
They didn't.
Say again.
I said, yes, they didn't. They didn't.
They didn't have it. So I'm going to look at what they did because they played on the same size court. They played an 82-game schedule. I think it went from 70 to 80, basically in the 60s, right? So, same thing, travel advantages and all of that. Everything weighs out. And again, that bigger, stronger, faster thing is a little bit overdone because, as I said, you can look at film of guys doing the same moves. You can look at Dr. J making the same crazy tomahawk dunks in his day, in the late 60s, early 70s, and can see the same amount of amazement. That's all I'll say on that. But the evolution of the human, no, it's not. No, the guys are the same size and can probably jump the same height.
All I'm saying is, well, first off, to Dart's definition, that is the definition of actual evolution. However, we're talking sports. Oftentimes I don't understand why we do this thing where we give definitions of an absolute rather than giving it to the exact description of what we are talking about. There's a definition that is actually on the National Institute of Health of what evolution means in sports, and we choose not to use it. The definition is the continuous process of change, development, and advancement in games, training methods, rules, and athletic performance over time.
Okay, cool.
And in that sense, it is not refutable that today's era of sports is more has evolved. It is more advanced than it was back then. To your point, Ro, I agree with you 1,000%. I think everybody agrees with you. Like, yes, the reason why they're more advanced, the reason why it has evolved is because of the advantages that they can take, that they can be able to benefit off of compared to back then. But that's not that even though you can add that context, the statement is still stands true. They have evolved. They have evolved, mentioning one person or mentioning one instance of a dominance of athleticism superiority compared to everything else that has encountered over the last 20 years. I think that is a very flawed way of thinking about this.
Hi, baby.
Well, interesting takes, guys. I mean, mute
your mic, Ro, man. We hear the love in the background, man. We don't want to disrupt that, man.
Well, with that being said, guys, you can go ahead and get everyone's final here and kind of wrap. But I mean, I think all in all, very good takes upon a variety of subject. I definitely get what you're saying.
Really, no beef. I'm talking about the training methods has evolved versus the.
As I was saying, we're gonna wrap it up. We'll get everyone's final take here, and starting with Dart. And you can comment on whatever, not just the evolution thing, but we can comment on whatever we're talking about here. Whether it's today's topic, which is about the era argument. There, we touched lightly on the Kobe, LeBron, whatever ranking players, and kind of that. But Dart, what is your final take on whatever it is.
I just want to say casual. Urban Dictionary is where I pull my definitions. And evolution, the number one definition of evolution is how your Pokemon change at certain levels. So there you go.
Oh,
I also wanted to add that Zion. People were talking about Zion Williamson with his gravity. Yes, he pulls a lot of gravity in the scientific definition for how big he is. Forgot to throw that zinger in there.
Oh my God.
Zing.
That's fire. That is fire. That's fire, Dark.
Yeah, but no. But past that, I thought that was a great discussion. Thanks for coming up here, Casual Row.
For sure.
I forget the other guy's name, Scott, I think.
Yeah.
But thanks for coming up. I thought it was a great discussion.
Yeah, it
Okay.
was. It 1000%.
Casual, what is your final take?
All in all, great conversation. As far as competition being greater in certain eras, it really just depends on what you value. As typically everything that we talk about, my stance on it, whatever you value, try to be as consistent as possible. So if you value the defensive side of the basketball, I don't see why 2000s doesn't have a case at the very least of being top two. Along with the 90s, if you value the offensive side of the basketball, I don't see why today's era or the 70s or the 80s would not be up there with how they were making shots at an efficient rate. It's just be consistent on what you value. And competition is subjective, because to you may not view the standard today as superior to the standard of yesteryears. So that's all I got to say about that.
And we'll get to you. Ro, what is your last take?
Yeah. So again, I just want to wrap my ball. I apologize because I ran into I came to the pool area and my people as well. They're greeting me or whatever. But anyway, I just want again to wrap the bow up. To wrap the bow up is like I said. End of the day, it's all the evolution is in the training. And I think me and Casual will agree with that. Rather than the actual athlete. Now, does that benefit the actual athlete? It probably does. But as I want to wrap the bow again, you have to, when you look at the competition, era by era, you just judge it based on what you see, knowing that, guess what? Everybody in that era had to deal with the same thing. So obviously, right? Everybody in that era had to deal with the same things, same training methods, everything else. And you judge the competition era by era. But you can't, it's really hard to compare again, because like I said, we now have surgeries that can repair the ACL, that can repair the Achilles. Guys felt, if you look at a guy falling off, maybe he strained his Achilles or tore his Achilles and then had to let it heal naturally and he never became the same guy. Now we got careers being extended. But that's great. At the end of the day, you have what you have. And it is good that we have research and analytics and everything else to change the game and improve it. But it's not to say that this game is better than that game. You just judge what you see. And at the end of the day, I think it's a perfect science. You just look at the numbers, you look at what people did in their certain eras, you compare it, and you move on.
All right, and to kind of piggyback off that, I think we had a great discussion there. This what I just kind of wanted to kind of reemphasize this as a parting shot there is that, and this is mainly to everyone in the chat too. If you use certain things to rank players, like that's what we're all about here, right? Like we want different points of view, various takes, just come with it and be consistent. Like we're trying to get away from the narrative structure where it just, we're trying to hype up certain people or certain play, whatever. We just want to be a holistic, area where we can discuss the game, in general. And like I said, obviously we discuss the Kobe LeBron thing ad nauseum all the time, but it's if someone tells me they want to pick Kobe over LeBron for any reason, I'm not mad. It's just whatever. But that being said, it's a look out for all of our content. We're going to be next week, and obviously this weekend you had. Obviously we were joined here by Kings Beach Row. Check now we have Casual here, obviously, and we will have Hoop got in, or what you know what his CW. I just want to plug his channel too, and go cast hoops. There we go. But with that being said, we appreciate everyone participating today, and we'll be back with another show with much more discussion happening next week. And so with that, we're gonna go in and have a fantastic rest of your Sunday.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Peace.